Hello, lovely people, and welcome back. Beautiful episode for you today on nonviolent communication, what it is, how to foster more nonviolent communication in our lives. Um, and wow, it's a lot deeper than I thought. A lot more about nervous system work, about self work, self compassion. And I'm so glad that I had this beautiful and very, very learned teacher and trainer and educator to come and share with us about the deeper aspects and applications of nonviolent communication, especially across the divide, the political divide, but really across any divide that we might see as we look to our fellow humans. Sarah Peyton is an author, a certified nonviolent communication trainer, and a neuroscience educator. She integrates constellations, brain science, and use of resonant language to heal trauma with exquisite and warm gentleness. Sarah teaches and lectures internationally and is the author of 4 books on relational neuroscience and self-compassion, Your Resonant Self, guided meditations and exercises to engage your brain's capacity for healing, the companion, Your Resonant Self workbook, From Self-Sabotage to Self-Care, and affirmations for turbulent times, resonant words to soothe body and mind, and The Anti-Racist Heart, a self-compassion and activism handbook co-authored with Roxy Manning, PhD. You can find Sarah at sarahpayton.com. Of course, we'll link that in the show notes. This is a good one. Get some tea and enjoy. There we go. Sarah, thank you again for making time to be in conversation.
Oh, Laura, thank you for having me come. I'm so delighted to be with you in your mission. I'm very happy about your mission.
Yeah, I was sitting around thinking, what do I want to do is with the next step with the podcast and what's important to be talking about. Because I really think that there should be intentionality behind what I'm putting out there because there's a lot. There's a lot of noise in the world already. And I thought we really need conversations about how to have conversations.
Hmm.
And then I remembered that long ago I had read this book about nonviolent communication, and I thought that might be important right now.
What a good idea.
And
Yeah.
so I know you have a lot of specialties, Sarah. But I wondered if we could just start there. Um,
Yes, of course.
that would be great. Can you share with us what nonviolent communication is and what drew you to that practice?
Hmm. Well, I was at the time that I discovered nonviolent communication, which is one of the one of the authors who I really enjoy. About nonviolent communication says that nonviolent communication is a spiritual practice masquerading as a communications uh,
Yeah.
approach methodology, and 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 that makes me really delighted because I do think there's this way that we we need to be sort of be as long as we're seeing the divine in one another, or if you're not somebody who likes the word divine, as long as we're seeing the kind of the flow of life and the power of the universe in one another, then we can have these conversations across divides.
Mm.
But nonviolent communication is a kind of an approach to thinking about language and the way we use language that lets us discover patterns of mutual stimulation and restimulation and lets us clear those and move toward something more deeply connected where we understand one another and understand the deep longings of one another's beings when we're having regular conversations with people. And it was originally developed by Marshall Rosenberg, who was a lovely speaker and writer and teacher of this approach. And I discovered Marshall when I was used and rare book dealer, driving around the Pacific Northwest looking for used book stock to sell online. And I got his CD set, and listened to it, and I listened to it over and over again. I listened to it 3 or 4 times,
Mm,
feeling into the power of what he was talking about, this idea that everything that a human says is either please or thank you, that
mm.
that a way that a curse at somebody "F you" is please, you know?
And
Was that
you're referring to is like, what I believe when he speaks about, I have a need that's not being met.
Yeah, yeah,
Please,
yeah,
please see that, please,
yeah,
I
please
is that
respond
what you
to
are
me.
referring
Yeah,
to, or is it
yeah,
something else?
absolutely. Please change the world for me. Please change yourself for me. Please make this experience different. Please, please,
Mm,
please. Yeah,
mm.
yeah. Now, the reactivity of nervous systems
Yeah, go for
makes
it.
this makes this a little, tricky, it's sort of like, doing a double backflip off of the high board, and entering the water without a splash to be able to move through the world and see one another's beautiful longings.
That's what I wanted to say. You started with that this is a spiritual practice, and that it's a, way of seeing people in their right, their longings and their humanness and their, and how do we see people that way? Mostly I wake up and I see people as getting in the way of all the things that I want to do, or as
Or the
vehicles to getting
or
them. It's hard
or
to see
getting in
people
the
like that.
Yeah, or getting in the way of the world you want to have
Y
exist, you know?
yeah,
Yeah, where
yeah.
everybody matters and everybody's voice gets heard and everybody gets enough to eat, you know? Wouldn't that be
Yeah, so
nice?
how do we, like, get through that fog and
Yeah,
see people like that? Especially the
yeah,
people that, that we perceive as causing harm.
exactly, exactly. How do we do that? Well, um, there are 2 things I think that come up for me that are particularly important, and one is what Marshall called self-empathy. Which is, holding ourselves in our own arms and saying, "Oh, Sarah, of course you are filled with rage and despair when you think about, this number of million people going without food benefits." Like, um, uh, and like the helpless combination of terror and fury. Of course you feel that. I mean,
Mm,
we are in a place where in order to be engaged at all, we need to kind of have a thrumming background um, music of holding ourselves with love and acknowledgement for everything
mm.
that we want to have happening that is not happening. Um, we all need that. Otherwise, we're going to end up in the hospital with heart attacks and high blood pressure and all of
I
those
mean,
other
that
things.
alone, when I hear you speaking about that, I'm hearing, like, self-compassion.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah, like a self-compassion that's just always right there with its arms around us.
yeah,
Yeah, catching us.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep, and that alone is a practice that,
Yeah,
um
totally.
yeah, that sometimes challenges folks, um sometimes I work with people on self-compassion, and I have to invite them to imagine they were talking to a friend because they find it
Mhm.
so hard to talk to themselves kindly.
And it can be a violation of our integrity to turn toward ourselves with kindness. People can have what I call unconscious contracts with themselves, where they promise themselves that they will not be compassionate with themselves because, for example, there isn't enough compassion in the world for everybody.
Mm,
So they'll withhold it from themselves because it's not fair that it goes to them and not to everybody. Um, and or it could be a betrayal of their family values. Like of
mhm,
family values on humility and self-effacement.
yep,
And so they have to let go of that loyalty and belonging in order to be able to move towards self-compassion. It's it's a b As we enter this world that you and I are stepping into in this moment, opening the doors to and stepping into, what we start to see is the layers and layers and layers of trauma and loyalty that hold people in place and prevent their relational imagination. So it's almost like folks who and there's this huge correlation between corporal punishment and conservative ideology. The more a child was beaten when they were small, the
Mm.
more likely, it's not 100% correlation, but more likely, the more likely they are to end up with a conservative ideology and the desire for punitive response to wrongs in the world. So when a politician promises a punitive response to wrongdoing, then folks who've been beaten as children get really sad. They're like so relieved because
Mm.
this is an unknown, unspoken, unconscious pain within them. And the strangest research of all showed that if you got people to talk about having been beaten as children, their conservative ideology softened. uh,
Wow.
it's like the unknown burden of having been so hurt changes the brain.
Yeah.
And so when we start to get this research downloaded and begin to understand the profound effects of trauma on the human brain, then all of a sudden we are walking through a world that's not filled with malevolent evildoers. We're walking through a world filled with um, battered
Mm.
battered kids who are hiding behind corners and can't see what's really
Mm.
happening and are in adult bodies and are making super bad decisions, um, and uh, and affecting the rest of the country, and it's tragic and it's horrific, but it changes the quality of thinking of people as malevolent or evildoers, or it's not easy to see that, but it
No, but that's excellent. That's
yeah.
excellent, like, actionable, direction that you're giving us there.
Yeah, yeah.
The I 2 things. One is the is unfolding that self-compassion toward yourself,
Mhm.
and then recognizing, in others, opening our sight a bit to look at, like, what happened to you, and
Yeah.
understanding some of that research and, um, is helpful for that.
Yeah, it's just so interesting. It's just a very, um, very, uh, um, we kind of don't realize the level of violence being enacted on children all the time
Yeah,
on a constant level, and what kind of an impact that then has on everybody involved.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
And what are some of the other tenants or, like, the groundwork that we need to,
So
or that
once
we'd
we
want to
yeah.
foster in order to work toward nonviolent communication?
Once we get these 2 things in place, the self-compassion so that we're not just in a state of activated fury all the time,
Hmm.
and, and the ability to see that others are truly deeply compromised rather than evil, then what we begin to do is to listen, kind of for the beauty that's there, the
Mm.
beautiful universal longings that are present in folks. I remember a conversation I had. This was during the time when Hillary Clinton was running for president, and the Pizzagate false news extravaganza broke. And I had an electrician in my house. I had two electricians in my house. So I started talking to one of them, and he was so upset about Hillary and the children and the Pizzagate. And I mean, he was his distress was genuine. Was
Mm.
and and within it was a deep love for kids and not wanting kids to be hurt, and so we ended up having just kind of this really deep and lovely connection, even though he was kind of, in my view, he was lost within a dream, an early convert to the lost within a dream experience. And I just still remember the quality of warmth and mutual regard and understanding that came to us, mm, because I was in this place of what are these guys? What is it? What are his beautiful longings? What are the
Mm.
beautiful longings of this other human? Yeah.
What a what a question just to hold, just to practice
Hmm.
asking oneself, like, in the background.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that changes what we're listening for. And even holding a question like that, changes how we listen. I mean, I
Yeah.
think, we often listen for where we can break in or, what
Yeah. How the heck
agree, disagree.
how the heck we can wake people up from their dream states. Yeah. Yeah.
Or what instead just listening for that person's longing, their inner longing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And the good that they want.
Yeah.
The and
Yeah.
the yeah. Yeah.
And as you're listening for that and you're picking up on that, um, what do you do with what do you do with what you find?
Well, the interesting thing that happens is that when you really get what somebody is trying to do and see the best in them, um, then they soften and more things become possible. I love the stories about the folks who have created friendships, for example, black folks who have created friendships with Ku Klux Klan members, and then the transformation that happens as people let go of their dream and step into the real world, their dream of the need for punitive um, destruction, and step into the real world. There's such beauty in that. There's a filmmaker who went and made a film about an American far right neo-Nazi party group, and after she'd been with them, filming them for 2 or 3 months, I think, she finally had a conversation with one of them, where she said, you do realize, he would say racist things and exempt her from them because she was, I believe she may be Pakistani, and 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 she said, you do realize that it is little children like me that you are scaring with
Hmm.
your marches and your rallies. You do realize that there's a price of terror being paid for little children who are just like me. And there was a change, again, another story of a change. Like
Yeah.
once we are once we are invited into a relationship where we matter and we are cared about, then there's a there's a personal there's the sharing of personal impact of systemic events
Mm.
that's really, really important. Um, Now, I'm very aware as we're talking, that we come to this as like, how do we have a conversation about across the divide? And that I'm a person who's very progressive, talking about how do we reach across the divide to people who are conservative and um, mm, um, who research shows are functioning. Um, with less than full access to all of their human creative power. Now, that's a particular sort of bias that I carry. I mean, I believe that research, and I appreciate it. And for example, the research that shows that conservative folks is the size of their amygdala is larger on average than the size of progressive folks' amygdala. So here I am with coming from a particular place, which I want to acknowledge for any listeners who are conservative and longing to reach people who are liberal, that you've got you've got your own foundational truths that you're wanting folks to understand and see and be with. And there can be, in particular, there's such a cost if one believes in the fundamentalist ideas that there's life after death, and that if people are doing certain things, they're not going to be in the best place after they die, right?
Mm.
So there can be huge love and care and longing and tenderness and the desire to save one's kids' souls. I just want to, acknowledge that somebody who would be coming from a conservative side and reaching across to the liberals would have a different set of longings, perhaps, that I want to hold as really beautiful
Mm.
and important, even though I've got my own ideas about
Mhm.
about brains and politics and fear and
Yeah, and when I conceptualize, reaching across the divide or, you know, s bridging and having conversations. I mean, there are all sorts of divides. There's political, and even when
yeah.
we talk about conservative and progressive now, it's like so many things are like shifting and changing and what those
Mhm.
words and mean. It really I really think about, speaking to anyone who's different or who we see as different um,
Yeah.
than ourselves, and um, or in Marshall's book, some of the really powerful examples of um, women being attacked and how she's able to break through um, using this kind of communication.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. Staying in a place of um a, a, a a deep commitment to human connection has brought extraordinary change in so many cases. And at the same time, just acknowledging everybody who's been attacked and froze. Like
right.
there's 40% of people who experience some kind of attack, verbal or physical freeze. It's just a human social animal's nervous system capacity. And one of the reasons that it's so important to understand the effect of the freeze on humans, and it makes them unable to speak, which is why so many governments outside of the US now are passing laws that say that that sexuality has to be consensual, that you actually have to get a verbal yes from your partner in order to know for sure that you're doing okay and that it's okay
Mm,
to continue, because the research shows 40% of people can't talk when they have a sense of being under threat of any kind.
mm.
So we get to just be so gentle and inclusive and loving to everybody's nervous system.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you speak to something really important. You mentioned it very briefly earlier about like the and now it's coming back about our nervous system. So, we could have all this training and intentionality in how we want to communicate and how we want to see people and how we want to look for their longings and for where they come from, um and then our nervous system could get activated.
Yeah.
And I don't know if that's really addressed in the nonviolent communication world. You might know more. I know you do a lot of work with resonance and with nervous system regulation. I'm
Yeah.
assuming you see that as a very important element or practice to bring in to be able to cultivate nonviolent communication.
Yeah. 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 The more our nervous system is on board with us, with our intention, the less torn we are and the more energy we have to reach out to somebody else and enjoy them. I mean, that's part of the um part of the beauty and the dilemma, because if you're at Thanksgiving dinner or Christmas dinner or Easter dinner or Passover or whatever, uh, Eid or anything like that, you're at a holiday meal with the family, and you look across the table and you see somebody with a very different political view than you, and what can rush in is all of the harm that their views are enacting, like the people, the actual human cost and death and destruction and starvation and the as so many people have said, if they take out Medicare, then I'll die because I'm completely dependent upon Medicare for the medication that I take to keep myself alive. Um, so so here we are sitting and knowing the human cost, and it's almost like a wildfire within us. How do we how do we experience that wildfire as a wildfire of love instead of as a wildfire of just unmitigated hatred and fury? Am I tracking in the direction that you're interested in here?
Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah. I wanna
Okay.
know how.
Well, this is a third little thing for us to do with our list. We're compiling our list of strategic uh, positional foundations for ourselves, and this is the um, the again, like a spiritual practice of linking what we are furious about, what we hate, what we are enraged about, linking it with our love.
Mm,
So, so when we look across the table and see someone whose points of view are impacting people's health and well-being and even survival, we we get to tune into how deeply we love humanity and how deeply we love the thought of a world that has some capacity to feed its people and
mm,
take into account the impacts of the different systems, domination systems that we live within. To use Marshall's term, he liked that word, those words, domination systems. Um, and 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 sitting there, then we no longer want to kill the person who's sitting across from us. Instead, um, we wanted to talk, to connect with them, and then to speak deeply about impact.
mhm,
It's like we want to include them in the circle of humans that we love.
mm,
And so there's a yeah, and that is really helpful because the only thing that really manages rage inside of the nervous system is love. That's the that's the combo that creates regulation of rage, is
oh, that's
to
excellent.
yeah, is to know what we love. Yeah.
Yeah, and just like you to understand that as a signpost is pointing you towards,
Mhm.
when you feel that coming up, it's, "What is that
Mhm.
teaching me about what I care about?"
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Yeah. What
yeah,
is the
beautiful.
really big picture of what I love?
Mhm.
Yeah.
I'm wondering if what you would say to folks who are like, "Well, I just what about boundaries? And what about, you know, uh, my like sticking to my values and um what about, holding people accountable? Or are there, I can imagine some of
Yeah,
that.
yeah. I did do a beautiful book with Roxy Manning, the anti-racist heart, and one of the things that she talks about, which is not originate with her, but she speaks about it beautifully, is the idea of calling people into their love, calling people in to their beauty, calling people into the best of what they long for, and and uh, the more that the person across the table's nervous system is knows that it's safe with us, the more they're going to be able to move into a more expansive worldview. The more they are in danger from us, the more their
Yeah.
walls have to go up. So there's a self. There's kind of like, what's our long game? What? And sometimes we just need to lose it, I mean, that's just true. Everybody just sometimes needs to lose it because we're living in a world that's scary and where difficult things are happening, and sometimes it blows our fuses and it's bigger than our ability. We have to have actual neurons inside of our right hemisphere that reach between chains of neurons that reach between the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala, to be able to be putting our own arms around our amygdala. I have a cartoonist who draws for me, and he drew this wonderful picture of first of a prefrontal cortex of a person reaching for a baby, and then right above it the prefrontal cortex in the brain reaching for the amygdala. Like,
Mm,
we have to have strong prefrontal cortex arms that reach for our amygdala and say, "Oh, sweetheart." And we grow those. Those don't come with birth. Those are developed. Those are not issued at birth. Those are software that gets installed and updated by our experiences of being acknowledged and held with resonance and known by
mm,
others, and have the love of our hearts be acknowledged and seen, so that we are anchored in a community that knows us and that can hold us as we sit across the table from somebody.
mm.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yeah, for people to feel safe with us.
Mhm.
Um, and I feel like so much of that is, in the nonverbal
Mm.
communication, because I
Yeah.
think we can feel if someone is open to us.
Yeah. Are their eyes soft or hard? Yeah. Is their
Yeah.
facial expression alive or immobile? Is their vocal tone varied, or does it just stay on one plane? Yeah, all of these things are gestures. Yeah.
Yeah. And on days where we don't have the capacity or we just can't get there, or it I don't know, it's coming up
Yeah.
for me that some days we have more space for that than others.
Yeah. Yeah. And then we get to just have that wonderful, self-compassion for those days when we lose it. It would totally. Yeah.
Yeah. Is there certain are there certain words or ways of speaking that are more violent or non-violent? Are there actual technical recommendations for the words and the sentence structure that we use?
Yeah, absolutely. Anytime we use a word that implies that the other person has done something to us, as a feeling word. So you can have clean feeling words like, I feel angry, I feel sad. Um, uh, but then you can have this whole other class of words that have implied blame in them. And blame is the left hemisphere's, it's the instrumental brain's easiest way, best way to to make sense of the world. If we can blame somebody, we can have solid ground to stand on in a difficult world. Um, and and it stops. Blame also stops us from thinking. So if I have blame and I'm like, okay, I woke up this morning in blame. I got to tell you, um, and I have blame for example, the Speaker of the House. I'm like, that is and my blame stops there. It makes my thinking reductive. It stops me thinking about systems. It stops me thinking about larger issues and problems, big problems that need to be solved. Knowing that, and so. Uh, so here I am with this incredible blame. It's a an addictive process blame is. Resentment and blame are dopamine driven, just like when we're doing cocaine or methamphetamines or whatever it is that call it chocolate or whatever calls us. And and um and so we get stuck in these loops that are don't really go anywhere. They're not productive for us, but they also stop communication with others. Blame is a kind of communication that stops everything.
Mm,
So if we're saying to our Uncle Jack, hey, when you talk about your political views, I feel abandoned. It's got a different quality than I feel so sad and angry and bewildered, and alone. Um, those clean emotion words make more space for Uncle Jack to find us rather than having to retreat farther behind the walls. So words like attacked, I feel attacked, I feel uh, judged, I feel disrespected. Those kinds of words contain within them the subtext, and you're doing it to me.
yeah.
You're doing this to me. Instead of us taking responsibility for our own feelings and just saying them, vulnerably straight out. There is an impact on me of what you're doing, and I'd like you to know what it is. I have certain feelings. There are ways that I feel really bad, and uh, and it is connected to what you are saying, rather than you are making me feel really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah. So learning about blame and starting to see the patterns of blame and kind of weed them out as if they were invasive plants in our garden is also part of the practice of nonviolent communication.
Mm. Like connecting with and owning our feelings
Mm-hmm.
and uh, the vulnerable feelings. You use that word vulnerable, and
Mm-hmm.
um, I imagine this is not an easy practice. I mean, it's why is it so hard for us to say like I'm feeling sad, I'm feeling hurt. Um,
Oh, such a good question. Well, one of the reasons is kind of goes back to attachment. In depending on our parents' attachment style with us, they could bear that we felt sad or hurt, or they couldn't. And the way
yeah,
that a parent shows that they can't bear it is that for example, avoidant parents pick their babies up just as much as secure parents, but not when the baby's crying. So a baby learns, if I cry, nobody's going to pick me up. The baby stops crying and carries that then message with themselves out into the world. 17% of our population, and a growing 17% in 2015, I think, and the percentage has been growing since then, is avoidantly attached and believes with every cell of their being, because it's been proved that it's not okay to be sad. It's not
mm.
okay to be sad. It's not okay to be vulnerable. It's not okay to be hurt. We are when our parents don't pick us up when we cry, we make the sense of it that we're alone in the world and that we just have to depend upon ourselves.
So what we need are a relearning
Mhm.
um,
Yeah.
in practicing that, whether it's with a counselor,
Yeah.
therapist, or someone that we're safe with, where we can get that relearning in our system that I
Yeah.
was sad, I shared a vulnerable emotion, that
Mhm.
person was able to be with it.
Mhm.
And then I kind of teach my system that it's okay.
Yeah.
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 And
Mhm.
and really calling into our adult self as well, is that even if it wasn't okay, like I could also handle that now because I'm not that child anymore.
Right.
Yeah.
100% yes.
Yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. So really asking ourselves to tap into that vulnerability in those conversations and not to go after blame,
Yeah,
but to own how we're feeling and
yeah.
name how we're feeling.
And,
Mm,
to begin to work with the unconscious contracts that we have. I will believe that I shouldn't cry. I will believe that it will be a burden on others if I'm sad. I will believe that that should never speak of being hurt. And then you say to yourself, why do I believe this? What is the function of my belief? And so then you can go, I will believe I should never say that I am hurt in order to, and then we think about those very earliest relationships because these unconscious contracts start before we have words.
mm,
And so we think, okay, in order to keep my mother from leaving me, I will never say that I'm hurt. I will never tell anyone that I am hurt in order to keep my mother from leaving me, in order to keep my father from having contempt for me, in order to keep my siblings from beating me. There's a lot of
mm,
things that happen to little kids in their homes. Um, and that they make agreements with themselves to try to survive. There's a pattern of incapacity that the kid has to figure out how to live with. And so then we say, oh, in order to make my mother not leave me, oh, my mother's been dead for 10 years. Oh, this isn't a contract that I need anymore. Not
mm,
everybody is my mother. My mother, yes, she had a certain way of responding, and not everybody has that. And I can hold myself now. I am not a dependent baby. I get to say I'm hurt, even if the people around me are unable to be very responsive about it.
mm. Sounds like before we can communicate well, there's a lot of self-work to do.
Yeah, yeah, it's kind of a lovely braid, though. Holding the intention gets us a certain way, and we hit a
Yeah,
block and we go, oh, instead of just saying it's a block, it's forever, we're like, oh, it's a block. What does
what's
relational
happening?
neuroscience tell us about these blocks? Yeah,
Oh, I love that.
yeah.
It's like an ongoing inquiry.
Absolutely. Yeah,
So you're
yeah, it's
getting if you're getting stuck or blocked in one part of the process, um, are there any other sort of technical things about language that you wanna say?
yeah. A lot of times we try to start a dialogue based on um, uh, two different views of reality, which takes us right back to our conversation about, how are we having conversations across differences. The first thing is to just kind of start out. I had this such an interesting conversation with somebody just about 3-4 months ago. um, uh, Somebody who really loved one of the appointees of the current administration, just was really a fan of this appointee, and I was like, okay, but you know we've just seen three children die as a direct result of this person's health policies. uh, how is that landing for you? And I discovered that the person I was talking to wasn't even watching the news. They're like, "I can't watch the news. I don't watch the news. I don't know what you're talking about." And I'm like, "Okay, well, there we are. We're not working with the same foundational starting point of what
Mm,
Marshall called an observation." My observation was that I'd gotten up that morning and seen in the news that three kids had died. Um, and her observation was that she'd heard this guy talking about stuff that was really important to her. Mm, the cleanness of a food supply, for example. And then, I'm like, okay, but the food supply, this person isn't enacting any policies that are going to protect the cleanness of the food supply.
mm.
and my person was like, just completely didn't even, it was like, this was not, they didn't even have any space in their brain for this. There was no space in their brain for this information or this level of thought about what might be needed.
This is a really tricky one. feel like we're opening up a big thing towards the end of our
Mhm.
conversation, but
Yeah.
because we are living in different realities, right?
Yeah, we
Because we're
are.
getting our news, and depending on your algorithm and depending on where you're
Yeah,
getting your news,
exactly.
we really are living on different realities. So,
So the
um,
observational starting points are not there for foundational for something to for both people to stand on to start from.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Curious if there's any thoughts on what to do with that,
Well,
or
I think, I mean, um, uh, it's something I'm really interested in. Like, I'm really interested in, n- will, I'm really interested in the change in the United States right now in who believes that which party is responsible for the current government shutdown. There's a
Mhm.
growing number of folks who are starting to see one of the political parties as responsible for the shutdown, and those people even voted for those folks. So it's like sometimes I just kind of want to sit back and with my jaw open and kind of see what what touches people, what changes people, what actually reaches in to the different these different boxes that we sit in.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
think what I'm hearing is like there's a point where reality hits and then
Yeah.
there's nothing that the commentator can tell you
Yeah.
because the reality hits you.
Right,
And that
exactly.
that truth is stronger than anything you're being told. So that's
Yeah.
that's interesting, and that's
Um,
sometimes what it takes. It has to hit
yeah,
home.
yeah.
Yeah.
But what we're talking about in a way is like one of the things we can do is discover what is the other person's starting point
Yeah.
and just kind of figure out what their beautiful longings and needs are based on their own starting point.
Yeah. Great.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And that then gives us some place to reach for them from.
Yeah. No,
Yeah.
important. It's like, where's the origin of this? Where are you coming
Yeah.
from? Um,
What do you believe? Yeah, what news
yeah.
did you watch? Yeah, or what news did you not watch? Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, Sarah, so much there, and I know we could go on for much longer. Um, if people want to learn more about you and your work, and you have such beautiful offerings on your site, wonderful practices.
Mhm.
What would be
Yeah.
some next steps?
Yeah, come to sarahpeyton.com, get signed up on the mailing list to start receiving the newsletters where I talk about classes, but I also tell stories from my own life like I was doing here on
Mm,
this time together. And then, kind of like how do those things reveal anything about neuroscience to us? What kind of doors begin to open, and what do we need to learn that expands our compassion for ourselves and others? Yeah, sarahpeyton.com. And also, a lot of people start by watching the YouTube videos. There's a healthy number of YouTube videos about different stuff that people can watch. And there's a set of guided meditations at the yourresonantself.com website. Yeah.
yeah, I love those. I did a few of them, and I really love that you pulled, you're founded in and the neuroscience, um, and really true to the research. And is there anything that, I mean, we didn't get to a lot, but it's the nature of going deep,
Yeah.
is there maybe one last thing you want to leave with our audience, or any
Yeah.
final thoughts or
Yeah.
words? Yeah.
Um, any kind of um, judgment of another person is is not true, or of ourselves is not true. It's trauma. When we get into those places where we feel resentment or anger or hatred or Those are and self-hatred and self-scorn and shame. Those are all the results of trauma. Those are not anybody's real self.
Mm.
Mm.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you so
Yeah,
much.
yeah. Thanks for having me, Laura, and a beautiful conversation.
So
And thank you
beautiful.
for putting out this series about this issue.